you've heard me say before on other shows, the dream worlds are going to unite and people are going to be sharing their dreams. As more and more of us connect to the soul groups, and then there are those of us realize that we have dozens of soul groups to connect, we'll be able to dream with someone in Japan or someone in China because they're a part of our soul group too. And we'll realize that we have soul groups spread all over the planet. And then we'll come to the understanding we have soul groups that are off the planet. And as we begin to unify our soul groups and come into these dreams, we'll be able to share this energy transparently, free of any system of domination and control. And that's ultimately why they set up the separation of two worlds, so we couldn't dream our star families or our brothers and sisters, soul brothers in other parts of the world.
Say, we are a unity Dreamtime society. That our world is set up. We have a global Dreamtime. Okay. All of our people have a global dream center. We live in sacred geometry cities that prevent us from going into the global Dreamtime.
Okay.
The event is all about us for a brief second experiencing unified global Dreamtime.
Okay.
And the more and more we get exposed to it, the more and more the awake people begin to experience synchronicity, deja vu, shared dreams. And when the armies began to march for Rome, for China, for Mongolia, they were conquering each local reality. Mm-hmm. And as they conquered all of them, they made roads to all of them and linked them to sacred geometry cities. Mm-hmm. They took away the unity consciousness and made disunity consciousness world. Mm-hmm. Because they were all centralized location to the networks of roads and dominating cities.
And that's also connected to the ley lines, right?
Correct. So it was to overwrite the ley lines.
Overwrite them, yes. They have been overridden.
They wanted you to stay a city-state dream country so that each individual city was its own dream group. Well, now we're about 5,200 separate dream cities right now, with many satellite dream cities all over. And these dream cities and Dreamtime societies are going to realize the fake foundations of those dream worlds. Classic example is New York City. They tried to make it a single dream group and tried to create these places of power that would lock people into dreaming in the city, but it just wasn't there. The too many people had relations to other places. When they set up the Statue of Liberty, it was to bring this concept of freedom, to bring people to the Americas, but it has a secondary concept. I don't frequently talk about this, but I will, simply because it's in the timeout and they can't do anything back to me. The Statue of Liberty is a Dreamtime entity itself. It was created to lock the dreaming people into that city. For a very long period of time, New York City was going to be the new city of the world. The powers that be at that time were going to literally make it the one main city of the global world. And it didn't succeed because they changed the system of money and the system of domination and did not realize that the energy of the people that were coming through Ellis Island and through the Statue of Liberty area were bringing the sacred feminine energy from other dream societies and muddled the waters so much that all of a sudden New York City became this portal dream city to thousands of other worlds. Thousands of other worlds. Because soul groups had met up and... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Andrew, that's remarkable to hear. And it makes a lot of sense. You know, after, when you explain it, it makes sense.
Well, you know, Los Angeles was the second attempt at creating the New World City, where it would be the Uber Dream City, where they were going to try to control everybody's dreams. They created Hollywood. They brought water from a thousand miles away over mountains and through valleys. And they did that on purpose, so they'd bring this water energy from another place that would feed this desert that was turning into this future dream city. But ultimately, it too fell apart as the movies began to be spread around the world, and people in other cities and other parts of the world dreamed themselves into the dreams of Los Angeles. And it too was subjugated, and then ultimately they lost that Dreamtime city. They tried to do it in Tokyo. They tried to do it all over the world. And each time they did that, they just weren't prepared for the onslaught of dream energy, this raw dream energy from the other parts of the world. No matter what sacred buildings they created, no matter what systems of domination they had to stay after the active awake people instead of the sheeple, because they'd already had their sheeple. So when they created the IMF and they started taking away the actual physical money, what they were trying to do is ultimately start to tax your dream energy, so you had less and less dream energy. So when there's nothing for your physical energy to go into, like gold or silver or coinage, with just a digital system, that digital system was a way to tax you of your dream energy.
All that settling, that was all directed. All that was all directed. As I told you, state-sponsored scams.
Yeah. Wow.
Irish, the Italians, the Germans, the French, they all came to America under a fake dream. Oftentimes their ticket was paid for them by the state. And they had no support when they got off.
Yeah.
A lot of times they didn't even have paperwork, because they didn't have paperwork then.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, like, since I've seen you, there's a new series called Frontier, which is about the Hudson Bay Company. And, I mean, it's a different thing, but it's about the establishment of the culture on the east coast of Canada, like North Canada, because I don't know that history, it's so foreign to me. And, like, obviously, the bloodlines and stuff of that company getting established, and like the British sort of establishing themselves, but then also the like the establishment of culture and opportunity. Like, I did a bit of reading about that whole like fur trade being a real driver of civilization, you know.
Well, there was a very nefarious concept behind the fur trade. So, ever heard the term "mad as a hatter"?
Yeah.
Do you know why that's called mad, and why it is Mad as the Hatter?
No. Well, I do have a bit of an understanding, but it's probably wrong, because the hats, they used to actually use a lead lining, from what I understand, and the lead...
Not just a lead lining. To get them stiff and tall and to make specialized hats, they would use quicksilver, large volumes of quicksilver, and they would hand fold the quicksilver in.
Wow.
So you're wearing a hat that has a quarter kilogram of quicksilver in it, and it's on your head the whole time, absorbing quicksilver into your brain.
That's crazy.
Wow. That's why
Mercury and lead.
Yeah, mercury and lead, and that was intentional to induce that into the population.
And that would actually go to the upper middle class, obviously, as well, you know.
Yep. That's what kept them crazy, drunk, and insane.
So what sort of era are you talking, like, age, time?
So whenever the big fur trade in the United States started, feeding Europe more fur than they could ever handle on purpose.
It's mid-1600s.
They didn't do anything with meat. They didn't do anything with the meat.
Yeah.
They would just leave the meat.
Yeah, they would, like, sacrifice the animals, you know, the life, and like really, like, with intent for
just for the pelt.
I remember, like, when you, like, my favourite movie is Dance with Wolves, and like that, if you watch the extended version, because they cut it out, the normal one, like, Kicking Bird takes, like, John Dunbar to the sacred spot where the birth of life.
Yeah.
They go on that horse ride, and they get there, and it's just being totally trashed by hunters, and all the carcasses are all there, you know. And it's just like the sacred ground is just being totally disrespected on so many levels, and it's like you feel for, like, Kicking Bird, because, like, the sacred land is just being totally like outhoused by society, you know. And it's a really powerful scene, you know.
So you can even argue that was done on purpose, that those hunters were haunted as because they were mad as hatters.
Yeah.
Because they were also exposed to large volumes of lead, quicksilver, so that they could do what? Tan. Or remove the pelts.
Yeah.
Lots of very nasty chemicals were needed.
But not only that, by being the way they were with that intent, they actually went into the...
right.
It's a bit like the haunting, like Dreamtime invasion sort of thing, because they got the sense that they could make money. So they were dreaming about greed, so that was, their own reflection of Dreamtime invasion,
Yep. And then the actual Babylonian money curse allows them to transfer negative spiritual debt directly to their action.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's another way, just another, like I say, the unique reality, but the outcome is common. Like the menu was unique, but the outcome was common to get
they were trying to
that region like hooked into the reality, the disunity.
And what they were doing was trying to remove the imprint of the previous generations by, making the unsacred acts.
Yeah. So I mean, like what you're saying with the animals, like the scale and the volume was just like horrendous, driven by greed, and then they would, traumatize the animal in the most horrific ways, and then that would be imprinted onto the land to lock it down,
Right. A conservative estimate, 450 million buffaloes were culled in 100 years.
Just for their hides. Yeah.
Just for the hides, yeah.
Wow.
And you could say at least 2 billion whales were culled in the whaling before the whaling industry collapsed.
So, I've done that oil sort of recording where you saw it. You said it's like the cranial sacral fluid. Right? Like, what was it that made the incentive to go to oil from the earth better than whale oil? Because you said that whales are like the true love being, like being absolutely destroyed and, used in that way.
Because they had already culled enough whales and they got down to the skin suits that they wanted. Different deals were made with the undersea populations. That's why the whales were being culled in the first place, because the undersea organizations had their own issues with those DNAs, because the undersea was trying to have its own unique pattern of DNA and sort of skin suits to incarnate in. And there were certain skin suits that could, really screw up their plans.
Yeah.
Okay, and the plans were, where did they go to breed, which was the 7 future generations. So if the whales were constantly in that area breeding and making the energy come out that they didn't want, and they wanted to put their more aggressive species or their more feeder species in, they needed to get rid of the whales. Competition to their DNA engineering.
Cool. So I get what you're saying. Like, even like Mandy, you probably haven't heard it yet, but in that recordings I've done, the 780 to 200 BC one, you go into the actual volumes of life in the different regions, like the hollow earth, the inner earth, the undersea, the on top of like the lands and the volumes of life, and each have their own hierarchy, if you will. Like, so undersea has got 20 billion in total life beings under the sea, and then there's the undersea UN and all that sort of stuff. So what you're sort of saying is that, the whales were seen as a threat to that undersea hierarchy, basically, and were given the go-ahead to get rid of sort of specific frequencies in that, because of competition to the incarnation sort of like hijacking and DNA harvesting and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I get it.
And they also needed to get people out of those skin suits by eliminating a lineage on the surface, which means they had to choose another skin suit. Was another option, another thing behind it. If you kill the entire pod, you can't incarnate back into a lineage that's very ancient.
Yeah.
That was the other thing. There was such ancient lineages in them that held the records. They needed to get them out.
Yeah, and the knowledge is lost, so we gain a foothold over the amnesia, The target was to generate amnesia at the soul and DNA levels, no matter what. So, yeah, you've mentioned like war, like when a culture gets to like a 10% soul family like reunion sort of threshold, then war is usually brought to a region. So it's like it's consciousness war, you know, understanding the full gamut of the purpose of the DNA, no matter what the skin suit. When we come from a place of ignorance, you know, we don't know. Fascinating.
Yeah. So you have a variety of other ocean life that's a mass breeding life, like the salmon. So the salmon are a major food source for a lot of ocean-based predator species.
Yeah.
And then the salmon are also a predator for medium and smaller size ocean-based stuff, so they're a major part to the food chain. So that was something else that was mass killed off, and then the tuna also.
Yeah.
You know, the Japanese ate whale and dolphin and stuff like that. And a lot of the Chinese would eat dolphin, and then they stopped eating dolphin in like the 20s and 30s, and they went to shark. So they switched to shark. So whale is a delicacy now, and you don't eat the blubber. That's the thing. You only eat a certain volume of the meat, so the rest of it's useless. That's why it's not feasible to eat whale unless you know how to prepare it and what to do with all the excess pieces.
Yeah, so that's when the shark fin soup came in, sort of thing. The shark fins were a prized delicacy in the Chinese medicine as well.
And then squid, you know, that's it's a worldwide dish. You know, squid. Everyone, you know, hunts it and prepares it. The Europeans, you know, they had a much bigger squid population in the Mediterranean. It was perfect waters for them. And then the Humboldt squid, which was on the Mexican coast, the Baja coast, and then goes all the way to Hawaii and Australia and follows the whales too, which follow the dolphins, etc., etc.
Yeah.
They're deep water hunters.
Yeah.
And then the octopus, which are just local, you know, they're not big travelers.
I thought they were.
No, squid are travelers. Octopus are more local hunters. They may have a few square miles or maybe a little bit more than that, but they're not long distance travelers. I mean, there might be certain breeds of octopus but as far as I know about octopus, they're not. Squid's a traveler.
What about the relationship with sort of cultures, like, say, going back to the foods and the delicacies, like with the sea? Like, say, certain fish in the cultures. Was it just a matter of survival, or there was a relationship?
There was a relationship. It was what was net fishable versus line fishable. So net fishing caught your variety of sized fishes. You just had to learn how to set your net traps as the predators pushed in the schools of fish that were sardines and smelts or whatever things that could be captured, degutted, and preserved in salt. Because, you know, you got a net of, 200 pounds of just say medium-sized sardines, and you gutted them right, and you had enough salt, they would be good for 25 years or more.
And
you're talking a tremendous amount of salt.
Yeah. But I know this from the Asian cultures in particular, that they actually fish for the very tiny fish, but they eat a whole fish. They sort of dry them, and maybe they cure them in salt or something like that. but they actually can, like, they're tiny fish. They might be like half an inch or less in size, maybe less. But they have like little jars of them, and they put them on everything, and they're so rich in sort of, because they eat all the, like the liver and all the organs in it, because they're so tiny. They're so dense in nutrition. They're such a staple for that whole culture, because they wouldn't get it any other way, you know.
That introduced me to that. You can get them stored and pickled and all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not. It's like flakes. They're just like flakes, but they're like dried out baby tiny fish. But it's actually core to the health of a whole society, because like, if you look at the regions of what they eat on, they wouldn't get the nutrition and certain minerals unless they had that sort of staple. And it's fascinating, because I got into, you know, the information, I'm into like vitamin K and Western Price, and all these indigenous tribes, they actually have sacred foods, you know, in their culture, and they don't have the science behind like why they consume certain foods, but they have an appreciation of the life that it generates. Like, say, pregnant women or women that were having the intent to have children, they would set them up on a sacred food sort of like preparation for the body to have a maximum potential for the child, you know. It's like, I found that fascinating, because we don't really have, it's a bit like the pheromone stuff that you say, and we use like deodorants and that. There's a disconnection through the relationship of foods and what they have an effect on the body. Because like, you know, like, you hassle me about my eggs, but I know in the resources I have and the way I do it gives me the maximum for all the variances that I can do what I do. And I'm only joking that hassle me, but it's like, I've got the sweet spot to operate in such a maximum with such, like, the variables I deal with. And I appreciated what the indigenous had. They appreciated sacred foods because they knew it would be core to life and certain things.
Yep.
I mean, obviously, like, you're talking like setting up all these cultures and stuff was the elimination of these sacred foods a part of it, but they knew.
Disruption of the food chain. And once there was disruption of the food chain, other predator species could take over and stop the sacred food from being available seasonally.
Yeah.
The sacred food would be available seasonally based off of, you know, who caught what where and who was trading what where.
Yeah. Because obviously the relationship to the land and the food,
right,
is a consciousness relationship.
Right. So if you look at the European Mediterranean thing, what the most things that were traded between cities was alcohol, olive oil, and grain. Okay, grain for flour, whether it was milled or not, didn't matter. It depended on, you know, what the purpose of what they're doing. But you can still find boats, Roman boats that were transport boats that have sunk to the bottom that have these giant, you know, urns that hold, you know, 12 gallons or 18 gallons of olive oil that still has perfect olive oil inside of it.
Wow.
Wax sealed that's been 200 feet under the water for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Imagine the taste of what that would be.
Oh, yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
But I think what you're meaning is the frequency of it compared to the frequency would be quite interesting.
Because it was hard to transfer stuff via the ocean without it going moldy or rotting or having the rats on the boat eat it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So whatever they could convert it and store it in. Dried meats, that was the other thing. Salted meats.
But what you're sort of saying to
salt. The rats didn't eat salt.
No. But what you're sort of saying is that you know, like the food aspect, there was an effort to disrupt that from the nature in the reality as well. It was a deliberate sort of imprinting sort of thing to
imprint people to destroy it on their own. Yes.
Yeah.
Because there must be some amazing like foods that have been lost.
Oh God, yeah.
That we don't know about. You know what I mean?
Uncountable numbers of foods